Hi there, I'm Stephen with WatchGuard Capital, and this is part 2 of What the Hell is the Tax Gap and Who Stole $10 trillion. It's part of my project to fix the United States' finances because our system is officially broke. If not financially, then at least morally. In part 1 of this series, I covered the tax gap, which is the amount of illegally unpaid taxes from 2001 to the projected tax gap of $584 billion in 2019. And I also presented this chart of estimates on who is not paying their taxes by income earning percentile. And on that note, a special thanks to economists Jason DeBacker, Bradley Heim, Antron, and Alex Yuskevej for producing these estimates in your paper, Tax Noncompliance and Measures of Income Inequality, because without your work, I couldn't do mine. In part 2, we're going to explore these estimates, how they impacted national debt in the past, how they're going to impact your opportunities in the future, and why they predict expanding wealth inequality and, unfortunately, a declining democracy. So without further ado, this is part 2. So we're going to take the information from this table and add it to this one. We're going to take the number of tax returns and adjusted gross incomes from this report and add it too. And then we're going to add some graphics to help make this story more understandable. This little dollar is going to represent $100 in annual tax fraud at the individual level. Each of these people represent 1% of American individual tax filers in 2019. This chart represents how much tax this group didn't pay that they should have as a percentage of the $584 billion total. And these large dollars represent the amount of taxes not paid to the government from this group in billions of dollars. So the bottom 10% of Americans made between $0 and $10,000 and illegally didn't pay the government $127 per person on average, which cost the government between $2 and $3 billion. Hold on. Are you shitting me? Let me break this down for you. In other words, the bottom 15.7 million Americans didn't pay about $11 in taxes per month on average that they should have. Now, tax theft is wrong, but if you're making less than $10,000 in America, I don't even know if you should be paying taxes. And since the standard deduction, or the amount you can earn before you even pay income tax, was $12,200 in 2019, I'm guessing these unpaid taxes are from Social Security and Medicare taxes. And since a large majority of these 15.7 million people are children and the poor, they should probably focus on their own financial problems before being expected to contribute towards the retirement and healthcare of our older citizens. I mean, personally, I feel bad for even asking this group to pay taxes, and I'll give them a pass on that $11 a month to buy a few extra gallons of gas or a bus pass to get to and from work, because if you're in this group, you need to make more money, or you're not going to make it. And I'll show that pass by marking your minuscule amount of $127 of average unpaid taxes as green, and I'm really sorry for even bothering you. Let's look at the next 10%, or 15.7 million Americans, who aren't doing that much better. They had adjusted gross incomes of between $10,000 and $15,000 and accounted for around $3 billion of the total unpaid taxes, which was still only about 0.5%. That's $190 a year each of unpaid taxes on average, or $16 a month. And again, an individual can earn up to $12,200 before paying a single dollar of federal income tax, and a married couple double that amount, or $24,400 before paying income tax. So most of this is still probably Social Security and Medicare taxes, which aren't blocked by standard or itemized deductions. So since they're also still barely surviving, I'm going to give this group a green pass as well. Put that $190 towards your own healthcare, and best of luck. The next 15.7 million Americans made between $15,000 and $25,000. It's estimated they legally didn't pay $380 in federal taxes on average for the 2019 tax year, or $32 per month. Not even enough to cover a cell phone these days. Those illegally unpaid taxes cost the government $6 billion, or about 1% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. I'm trying to find trillions of dollars to fix the US's finances and don't have time to call 15.7 million people and track down $380 per person. So green light for convenience, moving on. The next 15.7 million Americans made $25,000 to $30,000, and it's estimated they legally didn't pay $634 in federal taxes annually on average, or $53 per month, which cost the government $10 billion in taxes, or about 1.7% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. There's a good chance that individuals in this group aren't using that $53 per month to contribute to political campaigns and rig the game in their favor, so hard green pass for that amount. The next 15.7 million American tax filers made $30,000 to $44,000, and it's estimated they illegally didn't pay $887 in federal taxes annually, or $74 per month, which cost the government $14 billion in taxes, or about 2.4% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. So at this point, we've covered half, or 50%, or 79 million of the 157 million individual tax returns from 2019, but we've only covered 6.1% or $35 billion of the total $584 billion tax gap. So top half, what the hell is going on up there, and who didn't pay the other 93.9% or $549 billion in taxes? Let's find out. The next 15.7 million Americans in the 50 to 60th percentile of tax filers made $44,000 to $58,000, and it's estimated they illegally didn't pay $1,394 in federal taxes on average for the year, or $116 per month, which cost the government $22 billion in taxes, or about 3.8% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. I mean, at least we finally hit a triple-digit tax theft per month, but if all 157 million tax returns only illegally didn't pay $116 per month, the tax gap would decrease from $584 to $219 billion, a $365 billion or 62% improvement. So I'll give you the benefit of the doubt green pass for your $116 per month because our tax code is unnecessarily complicated. The next 15.7 million Americans in the 60 to 70th percentile of taxpayers made $58,000 to $76,000, and it's estimated that they illegally didn't pay $2,028 in federal taxes for the year, or $169 per month on average, which cost the government $32 billion in taxes, or about 5.5% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. The $169 doesn't seem so bad, but there's something about being over $2,000 for the year that seems slightly off-putting. So I'll give you a green pass for the first $2,000, but everything over that is getting a yellow caution flag, and you better watch it. The next 15.7 million Americans in the 70th to 80th percentile of taxpayers made $76,000 to $103,000 annually, and it's estimated they illegally didn't pay $3,042 in federal taxes for the year on average, or $253 per month, which cost the government $48 billion in taxes, or about 8.2% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. The 8.2% seems like a big jump, so everything over the $2,000 amount is still definitely yellow. The next 15.7 million Americans in the 80th to 90th percentile of taxpayers made $103,000 to $154,000, and it's estimated they illegally didn't pay $4,753 in federal taxes for the year on average, or $396 per month, which cost the government $75 billion in taxes, or about 12.9% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. So that's basically a car payment. These 10% of Americans are basically getting a perpetual free car with the taxes they are illegally not paying, so we are definitely in the red now. So at this point, we have covered 90% or 9 out of 10 American tax filers, but only 36% of the unpaid taxes, which means the last 10% of Americans are responsible for approximately 64% of all unpaid taxes, which is probably why the data format changed. Now we are not looking at 10% of Americans, we're only looking at the 5% of tax filers in the 90 to 95% range who made $154,000 to $221,000. Those 7.9 million Americans are estimated to have illegally not paid $8,492 in federal taxes for the year on average, or $708 per month, which cost the government $67 billion in taxes, or about 11.5% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. So that means these 7.9 million Americans illegally didn't pay $10 billion more in taxes than these 94.7 million Americans combined. So that's definitely a red problem we have. The next category is only 4% of tax filers who fall in the 95 to 99% range and made $221,000 to $546,000. Those 6.3 million Americans are estimated to have evaded $22,814 in federal taxes on average for the year, or $1,901 per month, which cost the government $144 billion in taxes, or about 24.7% of the total unpaid taxes in 2019. And 4% of tax filers generating 24.7% of the unpaid taxes is not good. So red, 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 that needs fixed. Okay, now for the coveted top 1%. To be one of those 1,577,000 tax filers, you had to make over $546,000. And if you were, your chart literally goes off the page because the average illegally unpaid taxes for your group was $103,297 in 2019, or $8,608 per month, which cost the government $163 billion in taxes. But there's a big difference from being in the bottom or top half of the 1%, so let's look at that. If you were in the bottom half of the top 1%, you made between $546,000 and approximately $1 million, and had estimated illegally unpaid taxes of $54,500 for the year, or $4,542 per month, which cost the government $43 billion in taxes. and at that amount, you can afford a great lawyer to stay out of jail. If you were in the top half of the top 1%, you made over $1 million, and it's estimated you illegally didn't pay $152,094 in taxes on average, or $12,675 per month, which cost the government $120 billion in taxes. And at that amount, you can buy a politician to add whatever you're doing as a legal tax deduction to our tax code, which is funny, but when you think about it, really not. And if we combine the top 10% as one group, those 15.7 million American tax filers are estimated to have illegally not paid $307 billion in taxes, or the remaining 64% of the projected tax gap for 2019. Let's recap how much each decile added to the total unpaid taxes for 2019. And for fun, let's set the scale of the arrow to the relative amount of unpaid taxes. Starting with the bottom 10% of tax filers, $2 billion, $3 billion, $6 billion, $10 billion, $14 billion, $22 billion, $32 billion, $48 billion, $75 billion, and finally the top 10% of tax filers, $307 billion. But none of these numbers are even close to $10 trillion, so where did I get that number from? Here are the tax years from 2001 to 2020. Gross tax gaps are known for 2001, 2006, 2008 to 2013, and projected for 2019. To get from 345 to 450 billion, the tax gap would have had to grow by 5.45% per year, from 450 to 458 by 0.9%, and from 441 to 584 billion by 4.8% over those time spans. So we can use those growth rates to estimate the gross tax gaps for all the years that we don't have official reports for. Combine the known and estimated gross tax gaps, and these are our estimates for 2001 to 2020. Known IRS enforcement numbers, which is the amount of unpaid taxes the IRS tracked down and eventually collected, are included in all tax gap reports after 2006. So subtract these numbers from the gross tax gaps and you get the net tax gap, or the amount that remained illegally unpaid after IRS intervention. So the IRS was able to reduce the gross tax gap by 11 to 14% per year by going after tax evaders, or 12.8% on average. If we apply that 12.8% average reduction to all gross tax gaps without enforcement data, we find these estimated net tax gaps for 2001 through 2020. So those are the taxes in billions that remained illegally unpaid for all those years. These are the 10-year Treasury note yields according to FRED, the Federal Reserve Economic Database. If $301 billion were not collected in taxes, it's reasonable to assume that the government had to borrow $301 billion to pay for expenses. The interest rate expense to borrow at the beginning of 2002 was 5.07%, or $15.3 billion per year in interest on the $301 billion principal for 10 years. The 10-year Treasury note would have come due or matured at the end of 2011 and most likely been rolled forward with new national debt creation and at the going interest rate cost, which was 1.89%, or $5.7 billion of interest per year. So the total principal and interest cost associated with not collecting $301 billion for 2001 ended up being approximately $510 billion, the original $301 billion of unpaid taxes and $209 billion in interest. And if we apply this process to all the other years, the estimated net unpaid tax gaps would have ballooned after we account for the interest expense required to borrow hundreds of billions of dollars instead of paying for those government expenses with taxes. So over a 20-year time span, the total cost of all this tax fraud ends up being approximately $10.5 trillion. So who stole $10 trillion? The bottom 70% of tax filers stole $1.6 trillion, the 70th to 90th% of tax filers stole $2.2 trillion, and the top 10% of tax filers stole $6.7 trillion in estimated taxes directly or indirectly by deferring a tax bill into the future to be covered by our next generations of Americans. Like I said, our tax code is officially broke, which is why I'm going to recommend scrapping it in part 3 of this series and implementing a simplified, lower flat tax system with cap deductions and 9 other ideas to fix our tax code and a host of other problems as well. I'm Stephen with WatchGuard Capital. Subscribe, share, become a Patreon to support this project, and invest your time wisely.